so I can see the world from there. I may never ride the waves or taste salty ocean air, build a bridge that will last 100 years, but no matter where the road leads, one thing is always clear. I am blessed, I am blessed, from when I rise up in the morning till I lay my head to rest. I feel you near me, you soothe me when I'm weary. Oh Lord, for all the worst and all the best, I am blessed. All along the road less traveled, I have crawled and I have run. I have wandered through the wind and the rain until I found the sun. Watching eyes ask me why I walk this narrow way. I will gladly give the reason for the hope I have this day. I am blessed, from when I rise up in the morning till I lay my head to rest. I feel you near me, you serve me when I'm weary. Oh Lord, for all the worst and all the best, I am blessed. You've given me joy, you've given me love, you give me strength when I want to give up. You came from heaven to rescue my soul. This is the reason I know. From when I rise up in the morning till I lay my head to rest, you make me feel me when I'm weary. Oh Lord, for all the worst and all the best. Oh Lord, for all the worst and all the best. We are blessed.
You are welcome just as you are. Your thoughts are welcome. Your doubts are welcome. We believe that God is here ready to engage with you in a new way. Whether you use the word God or divine presence or source of love or creator or higher power, or you're not really sure, you are welcome here. This is going to be the last of the Explore God series, week number 7. Over the last 7 weeks, we've gathered and explored God and the questions people today have asked most often. Today we are asking, is the Bible reliable?
Psalm 119, verse 105 says, "Your word is a lamp for my feet, a light on my path." Is that what you think of the Bible? Does it light your way? Is it a literal word, a historical record, largely myth and metaphor, or is it more a work of humans or Spirit of God? Bottom line, is it reliable? Here's what some people think.
The Bible, for me, is a guidebook.
I think it's inspired by God, and I do think it's filled with inaccuracies.
From a historical context, if you're like a literary studies person, the Bible is just another text in many ways, and truth is, I guess I'm a bigger believer in empirical evidence.
It helps me figure out how to live in kind of this crazy world.
The Bible is the most trustworthy book on the planet Earth.
I personally don't think everything should be taken literally, and I think depending on the person, they should be able to interpret the Bible the way that they want to.
圣经至今仍然是可信的。
There's plenty of things that even if you don't believe in God, there's plenty of things in the Bible that can improve your life, if you come to appreciate them, help you gain knowledge and wisdom, and help you to be a better person.
The Bible? That's controversial. Thank you for asking.
You'll see yourself in there. You'll see things in there that remind you of yourself, and it'll make you really want to change. You realize that Bible's not lying to you, but it's telling you truth.
It's a storybook, just like any book that you can buy at the library. It's just a storybook written by some people about some character.
Muchas personas leen la Biblia en diferentes maneras. Como usted lo lee, es como tú vas a tomar en vida.
I think the values that are presented in the Bible and the stories, I mean, they're all stories that apply to everyday life and things that have actually happened. So I think there's definitely truth, and you can definitely trust in what it's saying.
The Bible is still here. This book is almost 2,000 years old. It still exists for some reason, and to me, that stands out. That means something. It's not coincidence.
We believe that our full participation in interaction with one another helps us connect both with the divine and with each other. I'm going to ask you to go introduce yourself to someone and chat briefly about this question. What does it mean for you that the Bible is the divinely inspired Word of God that has authority, yet there are so many different interpretations and translations of that word? All right, we are all at different places on our spiritual journey, and we have different questions, opinions, experiences, and needs. You may not agree with everything said or sung here. Doesn't matter. We don't have to agree. We invite you to come open to explore more questions, more answers, more divine connection, however that might look for you. So, let's explore God and worship the God of our growing understanding.
Fix these words of mine in your hearts and minds. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Teach them to your children, talking about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up.
Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates, so that your days and the days of your children may be many in the land the Almighty swore to give you, your ancestors, as many as the days that the heavens are above the earth.
The Bible is used both as a word of grace and as a word of judgment in our world. When we ask, is it reliable? We might also ask, reliable for what? It has been abused and misused by so many. It has been misunderstood and mistranslated. How can we rely on this word to guide our moral and spiritual lives?
Yeah, when I was a student in college, I was not a Christian, and I was sitting out in an outdoor area. And I remember there were these Christians that were setting up these tables, and it was for their on-campus Christian club or whatever it was. And I started questioning, like, what if I was to have grown up in India? Would I have been a Hindu or a Muslim? What if my parents were Muslim? Would I just then have adopted the Muslim worldview and the writings, of Muhammad. Like what would have happened if I did not grow up in suburban America? And as I was looking at these college students that were putting out their pamphlets and their Christian, booklets and things that were out on the table, and they had some Bibles that were out there, I'm like, right, they're basing this information from the Bible. So how do we know the Bible itself, if that's where they're getting this information about Jesus and God from, what makes that religious document any different than a document that might be Hindu writings or Buddhist writings? Because they all seem to claim that they are the authentic truth.
I think if you just opened the Bible randomly and tried to read it, you could potentially turn to a page that would be incomprehensible or even offensive.
I looked at everything from creation through to some of the horrible bits in Judges with the genocides and all these horrible things which happen. And so it wasn't like, oh, I picked up a book and it was easy.
So I think it's important to understand the way the Bible holds together.
This is one book, but it's really a compilation of 66 books, right? Written by over 40 authors over like 1,600 years. And I think what puts the pieces of the Bible together for me is that really all of those 66 books are telling one story.
And the fact that we have this one book that is written over such a long period of time by so many different people, and ultimately it all connects and points to Jesus, that's brought me a huge amount of comfort in it, because that's just it's impossible for you to make a book work like that.
What started convincing me, it was a little by little process. Like it mentioned cities, it mentions names, it mentions, it's talking that it's history. And so a big thing for me was to say, like, all right, is this mythical or are these places real? And so then I started looking into the historicity of the scriptures. Because you can go to other religious documents and they can't find that, as I was comparing a bunch. Then a big question was also, I assumed that it was so far from what was originally written, because how do we have today what was about thousands and thousands of years old? And I found there's a few scholars who they go and study how did the Bible get translated into the English version that I read today. And the more I studied this, and that's what I was kind of very overwhelmed with, because the more I studied it, a lot of my thoughts of why I didn't want to believe it was from God, I began finding there's plenty of evidence to believe that it is trustworthy.
Most amazingly, the people of Israel end up in exile in Babylon. And you would think that would be the end of Israel, because every other people that was conquered by Babylon just sort of, they were conquered, they were assimilated. We don't have any records of those nations. And yet, at the moment when this empire has taken over the people of Israel, these prophets arise and they say, God has not forgotten you, God has not forgotten his people. And they give this picture of what's going to happen. Israel's going to return to the land, and in the land, God is going to meet his people. And then Jesus of Nazareth appears, and his cousin, John the Baptist, says, those prophecies from hundreds of years ago are being fulfilled now in this person. And the idea that this all connects, that the prophecies of Jeremiah and Ezekiel in the 500s, 600s before the Common Era connect to what happens in Galilee, in 0 of the Common Era, and that connects to what happens in the church 50 and 100 years later. It's just amazing.
I think a lot of times you have to go back to when it was written, the audience it was written to. Some stories were written as poetry, some were written as songs, some were written as parables and stories. Some were meant to be taken literally, some were meant to be taken in other ways.
we would be missing the point to say, was there literally a prodigal son? Was there a father on a farm in ancient Israel living somewhere, and what was it, a 2.4 acre plot and the son got 1.2 acres of it? I think to think like that in many ways would be to miss the point. Whether that story is historically spot on doesn't really matter in some senses, because the beauty of what's being communicated is so rich and so true that we should listen to the meaning of the text rather than fighting over its details. The question I think we should ask is it true in my heart?
I was dyslexic as a kid and had never read a book in my life. My religious education teacher in school, she lent me a Bible, and I'd never attempted to read a book from cover to cover. I'd kind of compensated for dyslexia. And as I read the Bible, I felt as though I was encountering someone who really I kind of knew already. If there was anything mystical about Christianity, it's in that moment where something kicks on in me, something turns on, where I read something about God and it brings me joy and comfort and delight, or I read something that talks about what I'm like and it sings and it stings at the same time.
The Bible isn't just sort of like a manual so that you can feel better about yourself, but it actually comes to speak into my life about my relationship to money, about leadership, about my lust, about my relationship to others, about my thinking about people who don't share the same faith as I have.
You know, it's referencing the history of people and how they lived their lives, and that's so applicable today, you know. One generation passing on stuff to the next generation and the consequences of that.
There's a famous philosopher, his name is Alistair MacIntyre, and he once said this. I love this quote. He says, the only way that I could ever answer the question, what am I supposed to do, is if I can answer the prior question, what story am I a part of? And you know, I think that's what the Bible is ultimately offering. It's offering a story. It's offering a better story, a story to help make sense of our crazy human existence. I mean, all of us are living in some story.
The Bible having four basic plots, creation, fall, redemption, and renewal, they make up what it is that we long for as human beings. The explanation of sin, the need for grace and redemption, the hope of transformation, that we're not abandoned, that we're wanted, that injustice is confronted. All of the plots that make a story great in a secular format are actually the same thing that inform the storyline of the Bible. And so I think that in some sense it is the true human story that underlies our experience and our existence.
Just like Jesus, when people met him, they actually had very strong reactions to him. I think the Bible produces that. You just can't be as neutral about it as you can be even about other ancient religious texts. There's something about it that addresses us and kind of pushes us to decide what we're going to do with it.
Please turn to those around you and in twos or threes share together for a few minutes on one or more of these questions. If someone asked you to describe the story of the Bible, what would you say? And what role does the Bible play in your life? So the question before us today is the Bible reliable? Is the Bible reliable? And I want to go back and reinforce something I said earlier in the service. You may not agree with everything said or sung here. That doesn't matter. We don't have to agree. just because I'm standing up here and they let me talk for a few minutes, because they're crazy enough to do that and you're crazy enough to indulge them, that doesn't mean that I have all the answers. It doesn't mean that you should agree with everything I say just because I said it. Trust me, I'm not that powerful. But really all we're doing here is entertaining the question, right? Is the Bible reliable? And I love this question that we were discussing on just a second ago. If someone asked you to describe the story of the Bible, what would you say? Because I think about this a lot, actually. And there's two things about that. One is that it's a love story. To me, it's just a love story. It's a story of a God and figuring out how to be in relationship with each other. But I also think about, all right, I'm among friends here. You all know me. You know I'm a little bit sarcastic and the tiniest bit irreverent. You know I've got a bit of a sense of humor, right? So I'm going to tell you about this book that I just love, and I'm going to tell you that you may or may not enjoy this book as much as I do, but I think, because I know some of y'all too, that you might. It's called God is Disappointed in You, and it's by Mark Russell. And what it is a humorous look, a humorous description of each book in the Bible. And it's quite funny. He just takes a few minutes to talk about each book, and there's 66 of them, so this is a big old book. But what's really interesting to me about it, in addition to the fact that I laughed a lot, and I always love to laugh, but what's really interesting to me about this is this guy does a really credible interpretation of the Bible. I mean, this is a guy who read that book and read it a bunch and studied it a bunch. And even though he's being humorous and even though he's being sarcastic and doing all those things that I love, he's also got it right, in my opinion, in some ways. You know, and you get down into some of the minor prophets, and there's one where he's talking, it's just basically it's a letter from God. Look, these people, they've been driving me crazy. They've been driving me crazy for centuries at this point. I love them. They break up with me, and it's just, you know, and it's true. It's so true. We love God. God loves us. We break up, we fight, and we get back together again. And it's just, I can't recommend that book enough. The description for this has been a sermon series that somebody designed the whole series, and so they've got these little sermon notes, the suggestions of how to structure the sermon around the videos and things. And the suggestion is always, start with a personal story. And I'm always like, I don't really know what to do with that, except that I read this really great book that I recommend to you, and you're going to laugh, and there's a very possible chance that you'll read it, and you'll be like, she's really twisted, and we don't really want to have her back in our pulpit again. Have we scheduled her again? Your results may vary. But I really enjoyed it, and I'd be interested in your feedback if you go read it too. So, is the Bible reliable? I'm not going to give you an easy answer. I never do. I'm going to say do your own research. And then I'm going to say I believe that the Bible is reliable only to the degree that we are responsible about it. And I also will tell you that I believe that there are a lot of people in our culture who aren't very responsible about it. They want the Bible to be bumper stickers, and they want the Bible to be proof texts. They want it to be easy answers. They want it to be one of those things where they want it to be a magic 8-ball. They want to open it, they want to ask their question of God and open the Bible and then read that verse, and that's their answer. Now, the really good news is that this book is structured so that when you open it up in the middle, you get a psalm. And most of the psalms have something useful to say to an immediate moment. That's the comforting part. But I'm always scared about somebody's going to open it up and do that thing, and they're going to come up with the one in Judges where somebody was supposed to cut their daughter into pieces. There's some disturbing stuff in this book. It's a dangerous document. And when we don't acknowledge that up front, we're not doing ourselves or our community any favors. I get nervous about this. I'm excited about this, and I get nervous about this because the Bible is a dangerous thing to talk about. And there's some people I do not talk about the Bible with because they get a little wound up. They do. And it's not a productive conversation. I don't mind being, passionate about stuff. Again, you've met me. But I mind when somebody is so focused and shut down at the same time that they're inflicting their viewpoint on me. That makes me nervous. So this is a difficult document. It is only reliable to the degree that we do our work and we do our research and we approach it with the respect that it deserves. This is a complex thing. Now that said, I don't want to make y'all real nervous. I meet a lot of people who almost one of the first things they say to me is, well, I'm not very religious and I don't know God very well because I don't know the Bible by heart. There's a lot of people who worry about that. They worry that they don't know enough about the Bible to be able to be connected with God. And I love, one of the guys in the video was talking about, I just sat down and I started reading the Bible and it was approachable to me that day. I think that God will meet us where we are on that. I don't think it has to be, while it is a dangerous document and complex and it deserves respect, it also does not have to be a scary document. I was in one of the conversations earlier talking about fire, because I said the Bible's dangerous, and somebody said, well, all good things are. And they are. Fire is dangerous. Fire it can burn you, it can kill you, it can wreck your life, it can destroy your home. We have people in this room that know what fire can do to take you apart. And we use it every day. We use fire in the form of electricity to be able to see in this room. We use fire to stay warm, we use fire to cook, and we use fire for comfort. Lots of us have memories of sitting around a campfire and singing and being in community with people, right? Bible can be like that. It can take you apart, it can burn you, it can burn your life to the ground. And some of us have that experience from the Bible too. Well, from people inflicting the Bible anyways, right? And it can be a comfort. And it can speak to us when we are in pain. But don't be mistaken, this is a complicated thing. It's 66 books, so it's not really a book. I mean, yeah, you carry it around in one portable volume, but it's a library. And it's a library that was written over an arc of centuries and by a bunch of different people. And they talked about like 40 different authors. That's arguable too. Each one that's attributed to a single author is probably still a collectively assembled document. Genesis most definitely was. There's about 5 or 6 different sources that you could identify in there without working too hard at it. It's got history. It's got genealogy. That's the part my grandmother loves, I'm sure. It's got, legends and poetry and laws and all kinds of stuff. You can't read all of those things the same way. I'm the kind of person, I'm a book nerd. Yeah, I know you hadn't figured this out yet, but I am. And I'm usually reading about 4 or 5 books at the same time. In order for me to do that and keep track of them, I have to read 4 or 5 different kinds of books at the same time. So I've always got something nonfiction going on. I've always got a classic going on. I've always got something that I call brain candy going on, like something sci-fi. I've got a young adult novel going on. I've got something that I'm studying for work-related purposes, things like that. But I have an assortment of different kinds of books, because if they were all the same kind of book, I wouldn't be able to keep track of them. But I don't read them all the same way. One of them I'm reading for the story. One of them I'm reading for information. One of them I'm reading for because I need answers about how to deal with my life. One of them I'm reading because everybody else in my life has read it, and I know the Cliff's Notes, but I've never actually read it. And I want to have my own informed opinion about the conversation that's happening around it. It's the same thing with the Bible. I can't read all the things in the Bible the same way. I get very frustrated. This is me personally. I get very frustrated with people who say, I believe every word in the Bible literally exactly as it is written. Because that's an impossible statement. My father drove him crazy too. And the way that he always dealt with this, because I got my sense of humor from somewhere, is he would say, okay, I understand. So which creation story do you follow? Genesis 1 or Genesis 2? And they always come back with, well, both. I believe them both, exactly as written. And then he'll invite them to go back and read, because of course they do now. They do. he's messing with us somehow. He absolutely is. He has a lot of fun with that. But Genesis 1, just to be really simplified, but I encourage you to go back and read them yourself, Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. Read the whole creation story and compare point by point how they are different. But I'll give you the first one, which is in Genesis 1, men and women are created at the same time. Male and female, they are created, and it is good, right? And in Genesis 2, we have Adam created first, and then Eve created as a helpmeet for Adam because he got lonely. Now, if I believe that every word in the Bible is true exactly as written, now I got a problem, and I'm only in the second chapter of this doggone book. But if I can look at these two stories as two different explanations for how things came to be, and two different stories that can inform my life in different ways, but with equal weight and power, now I got something really powerful to work with. Now see, this is it makes people nervous. It makes people nervous, but this is the other thing to think about. Because then the person who's trying to look at this as a very simple thing is now stuck with the question of, well, which one is a lie and which one is true? And that is also oversimplifying the concern. And for a comparison, I'm going to suggest to you a complex news event. Hurricane Katrina. Let's take Hurricane Katrina, which happened 10 years ago last month. Well, all right, several months ago now. Time flies when I'm focused. But it happened, the 10-year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina was this year, right? Most of us were around then. Most of us were following the news cycle then. And we remember when it was a storm in the distance, and then we remember when it was a storm that was beginning to develop force and strength, and we could see that it was coming, and then we began to see where it was coming. And then we told the people who were in its path what they needed to do. And some of them did it, and some of them were unable to do it. And now we're getting into some really complex stuff. Because now we've got people who have a whole history independent of that weather event, but their history of that weather event affects the weather event, right? And now we've got all these, there's just a lot of complicated stuff. And then the storm hits. And then in the aftermath of the storm, there's all the things that happened in the aftermath of the storm and how they affected the people both at that site and away from that site, and how we were affected by experiencing those people being affected, right? And then there was all the stuff that happened 3 months out and 6 months out, and then the 1-year anniversary and all the things that, there's news that happened with all of this. There were reporters that had things to tell us about every single level of this dynamic, right? I got it. Thank you very much. Gravity still works. This is important, right? This is as we're following this news arc, there's reporters through every piece of this. And none of them are telling a lie. At least to the best of their ability, they're not telling a lie. We don't have people getting on the news and telling us unreliable things. If they get on the news and tell us unreliable things, we get them off the news relatively quickly. But we do. And even though most of us have a favorite station and a station that we love to hate, we're still able to acknowledge that the station we love to hate gets it right sometimes, and we're still able to acknowledge that the station we love doesn't always get it right, even though we'd like them to, right? But for the most part, this is reliable information. For the most part, it's accurate information at that moment. And then more stuff happens, and the news that was presented previously is in a new context, and we understand it in a new and different way. And sometimes, as we continue to report events that happened later, we incorporate the stuff that was reported earlier. You know, we get to anniversaries, like a 10-year anniversary, and we're going to incorporate the stuff that was reported at the very beginning, the stuff that we learned as we went along, and then we're probably going to wrap it up with some where are they now stories. And those where are they now stories, it's just like with the prodigal son story that they were talking about in the video. It's not about this one specific person, this one family has this one story. This is how does this person represent so many other stories that we don't have the time and the space to tell. But none of those things are a lie. None of those things are inaccurate. It requires that we look at them all with perspective. And we acknowledge that it's a complex event. And that nobody has the right answers. And the Bible's like that too. The Bible is taking the history of a people, a particular tribe of people, and how they've affected the world, how they affected each other, how they've affected the world, and then how that's gone out, and how that... I can't even boil it down to a 30-second elevator speech. But then that relationship with a God and his people, and a relationship that God finds so frustrating because we are, there's a place that says we are stiff-necked people. We are. And then she says, okay, that's it. I got to go down there and talk to them face-to-face in person. And we have not one, not two, not three, but 4 different accounts of what that looked like. And they don't agree with each other either. And that's okay. They still have something useful and informative and nurturing and comforting and educational and challenging and scary to say to us, every one of them. And then the results of God having been here in person, in body with us, and how we react to that and how we go out into the world. And just because we got to book 66 in Revelation and we ended to got to the back cover of the book and closed it, does not mean that that's the end of the story. That's just the end of the stuff that we wrote down that we're carrying around with us. The story's still going on out there, and we are still part of the story. We are still part of the story. We are still informed by the story. Now, I only chose one Bible reading today, and really I probably wouldn't even have chosen that, except that it's tradition here. We read some scripture while we're here. But when you have a question like, is the Bible reliable? And then the words that you use to answer the question come from the document you're questioning. That doesn't seem entirely, well, all right, it seems a little hinky to me. And so I guess we're just going to keep asking the question. But the most important thing here is don't take my word for it. Don't take anybody's word for it. Just because somebody has the power and the wherewithal to get on TV, don't take their word for it as being more powerful than your word. Do your own research. Is this Bible reliable for you? Is your interaction with this Bible nourishing and helpful to your life? And when you encounter the stuff that's disturbing about, because, okay, let's look at this too. And I won't go on forever, I promise. I know the Cowboys are playing this afternoon. But, is the Bible good news for everybody? Because in the Old Testament, there's a significant part of the Old Testament that talks about this tiny tribe of people being promised a piece of land and going and taking that land, which does not happen to be unoccupied at the time, by force from the people who are living there. Now, if you are descended from the first peoples and the Native Americans, does that sound like good news to you? This is a scary and dangerous document. But I don't want to leave you only with the negative stuff. This is a powerful document too. And it can change your life. And it changes everybody's life in different ways. Lots of us pick we get this as a gift in 3rd or 4th grade, and we go, oh, great, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to read it cover to cover. And the good news is that first book, Genesis, is full of a lot of interesting stories and useful stuff. Because then you get to Exodus, and the first part of Exodus is full of some interesting stories too. And then you get down to about a third of the way through Exodus, and now it's getting to be a pretty dry slog. Because all we're talking about is how the temple was constructed, and they gathered all the gold and boiled it down, and they allocated this to that part of the temple, and they measured it out, and it's starting to read a lot like a blueprint for architectural plans. And that's about where most of us peter out. Right. But if we can look at this as an assortment of different books and just pick out a different book today and read this book. And what is this book? Where is this book located in the library, and what does it mean? What was it speaking to? And what did the people who wrote this book have as information for them at that time? You know, by the time that Jesus came, Jesus had the entire, what we call the Old Testament, his Hebrew scriptures, was his library. He was informed by all that stuff in the things that he said to us that are reported to us in the Gospels. All that stuff was already existing. So it informed it builds on itself, is my point. But it's worth reading. Well, okay, so I got that Bible as a gift Bible in the fourth grade. I got mine in the fourth grade. And I sat down and I tried to read it. And I got to about a third of the way through Exodus, and then I got bored and I went and read other stuff. And I still went to church every Sunday, so I was exposed to the Bible in a lot of different environments. I was exposed to Bible stories. I was exposed to Bible interpretation. I was raised by wordy people. But I didn't so much pick it up and read it or study it. I really didn't. And then there was the day that I was being a camp counselor for a church camp. And they wanted me to do the talk one day. I don't know what I'm going to talk about. I got to pick something to talk about. They want me to do the talk. And I've just flown up from Florida with what's in my suitcase. I don't have anything with me, and I couldn't find my Bible that I've been carrying around since the fourth grade. So I borrowed one of the Bibles that they had sitting in the lodge, which happened to be a completely different translation than the one that I had. It was what they call the Good News Bible, which is like the Message. It's a translation that uses vernacular rather than trying to be as accurately parallel to the original language as possible. Different translations have different values. That particular day, the Good News Bible spoke to me. And I was reading it, and I was trying to look for something to talk about, something to inform, and I found I couldn't find anything because I kept getting lost in the stories. I spent a good solid 2 hours sitting there just reading it for fun. Never in my life have I sat and read the Bible for fun up until that moment. I was like, I got to get a different Bible. Clearly, the translation I had wasn't working for me. And I went back and went to the bookstore and bought, I did. I spent about 45 minutes looking at all the different Bibles and translations on the shelf, and I picked one out. And I think what I picked out was an NIV Study Bible, which is still actually at the moment my favorite translation. And since then, my relationship to Bible has been a lot more personal, because I can see myself in it. I can see the people that I know in it, and I can see the ways that I've experienced the world in it. And I can see the things that excite me about life and that disturb me about life, and I can see some guidance about how to handle those things. But here's the other thing about this complex and dangerous document, is it's really not meant to be read in isolation. Catholics, back when all there was for the Christian church was the Catholic Church and the Greek Orthodox, back in medieval times, they didn't let you read the Bible because they knew how dangerous it was. They didn't teach you. They weren't really interested in teaching you how to read. You needed to learn the Bible through the tradition, through the experience of the worship and living of the church year, and what the clergy told you, because, they had the time and the knowledge and the wherewithal to study it, and they knew what it said. One of the big revolutions in the history of the Christian church was when the Protestant movement happened, and they started to say, it's okay for each individual person to read this book for themselves, learn something about this book for themselves, and develop their own opinion about it. That was a big deal. But one of the things that's happened that's trickled down to us today is we start to think that that just means that I study it by myself. I learn so much more about this thing when I study it with other people. When I sit with other people in a group and say, what does this mean to you? And here's what it means to me. Just like when we sit here in twos and threes and talk about a question, I always walk away with more than just what I knew when I walked in. And what I knew when I walked in is transformed by what you've said. You're always looking at things I never thought of. And that's why I started out with, don't take what I say up here as the end-all, be-all. I don't know everything. All of us together know way better than any individual one of us does. Let's don't forget to work together on this. But is the Bible reliable? Do your own research. Be responsible about it. Know what you're looking at. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. And don't think you were designed to know all of it. And let's keep working together on the journey. Amen.
Thank you for taking the time today to listen to this message. I hope that you heard something that touched you. We want to engage with you, not just send out these sermon videos and let them just be out there somewhere. But we want to engage with you, so I want to invite you to write your comments in the YouTube comments section below the sermon, or come find us on Facebook and share with me your questions, your comments, your insights. Find us at our website, mccgd.org. There's a number of different ways in which you can engage with us from wherever you are, another state, another country, homebound, whatever your situation. Most of all, I want you to know that you are a part of the extended community of this church. You are a part of the family of God. You are a beloved child of God. Thank you for watching.